Okay, and I think I am live, and I mean I, as in I myself, because most unfortunately, for reasons out of her control, unfortunately, Jolien couldn't join me tonight for the chat we were meant to have. So, don't panic, don't fear. We have rescheduled for next Friday at the same time. So, I make that 20th. Friday the 20th, at the same time as now, so 10 o'clock Central European time, we will be hopefully having the chat that we were meant to have today. So, so that's it, really. I might just wait a couple of minutes to see if anyone pops up, just to say hi and apologize and to say sorry for through no fault of anyone. So um, that's that. But in seeing that it's Saturday evening where I am, and probably people have got things planned and things to sort out on their Saturday, I'm assuming there won't be many people passing by, which is okay. And then I can go and continue reading A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie, which I'm halfway through and enjoying quite a bit, actually. Surprisingly enjoyable, but I don't want to say much more about that book because it's a read along and there'll be live streams and conversations and stuff like that. So there we are. Um, just so yeah. Unfortunately, the live stream is not going on ahead tonight. Um, some of this will tell you something a little bit that I'm going through, sort of health wise. Not for you to feel sorry for me. This is just a factual statement of how things are. And if anyone's got any comments or advice, I'm more than happy to hear. So it turns out, at the tender age of 42, I've been diagnosed with celiac disease, a disease for which I've got absolutely zero symptoms, and I've got absolutely nothing to show for. Um, I went for some tests to do with something else, and the something else was fine, but then it turned out apparently my um, anti-gluten antibodies were through the roof, like I'm 6 times over the limit. So the doctor was a bit surprised, asked for the tests to be done again, and 2-3 weeks later, same results. Um, Antibodies through the roof. I've got celiac disease with no symptoms whatsoever. I've never had any problems of any kind. And so now I'm looking at the dreaded celiac diet. No wheat, which I could do more or less. No wheat is not that bad, but no beer for me is okay. I'm really sorry. There's 4 people. So Shadia is here. I thought Shadia, you might be here. Um, so in case you missed the beginning bit of the stream, unfortunately, Jolien is not feeling well, so she's not going to be joining. However, if anyone else feels like a chat, I could pass you the live stream link if anyone wants to join in and just have a casual chat. If not, um, I'll yeah, I don't know. Well, anyway, so as I was saying, so I've got this now. Apparently, I'm celiac, so I cannot have beer, which is the only thing that bothers me. Is the only thing that bothers me. Yes, indeed, because I'm a big, no, I'm not a big beer drinker, but big beer fan, right? So in my social circle here now in Spain, I have fallen in with a crowd where, you know, we were going to this craft beer bar and enjoying our time there. And the last couple of years have been a journey through discovering the whole craft beer movement and educating myself in there. And now it's like, can't have beer, mate. So that's probably the most irritating thing about the potential outcome. Because I suppose the argument is, if I haven't got any symptoms, why would I go on such a restricted diet? But not being a medical expert, there's possibly something's going to go wrong if you don't treat a condition, right? That's just the natural thing. But anyway, thank you, Shadia. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Chris. Honestly, if anyone wants to, you feel like joining tonight, you got your camera, your microphone, or whatever, I can pass you the link to the stream, because unfortunately we had to move it to next Friday, same time. Some issues out of Jolien and my control, and hopefully everything will be fine and cool for next Friday. Yeah, what's everyone up to on this Saturday afternoon / evening, whatever time it is for you guys? I guess everyone is having as an exciting a Saturday as I am having. The joys of being a family man, I suppose. Yeah. Doing a puzzle, excellent, Sharia. Yeah, Chris. If you if you're up for it, if you want, let me go to where is it? Invite. There you go. Copy that. Jimmy Nuts sounds like a weird mafia dude, right? Okay, hopefully that's the stream link there in the chat. So hopefully anyone that wants to join. Yeah, sure. Take your time, Chris. Honestly, my wife's in bed. The kids are in bed, so I'm just don't know. It just feels a bit strange doing this. Chris is a nice guy, says Shadia. I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked to Chris. I don't think I've ever had an exchange with him of any kind. I'm sure there's nothing wrong with him, or if there is, he hides it well. Top tip: if there's something wrong with your personality, hide it. I don't know. Then everyone's wrong and right is relative, isn't it? So I don't know. What are you reading now, Shadia? You're always reading. I know you're doing a puzzle now, but what books have you got on the go? No, I don't have an HBO account. And what's the thing? At the moment, for the last couple of years, I've got this. There's not really been a single TV show that has really caught my attention and made me want to watch it, outside of the Squid Game, I suppose, and the Spanish one. I don't know what it's called in English. The one with the assault, the mint in Spain, and the central bank of Spain. I don't know if that got translated into English. But I started watching The Rings of Power, and I stopped after the 4th episode. If that's any help, it didn't do anything for me. Oh, sorry, Doom Messiah and Black. Aha! And here is Chris. If I press the button. Hey, Chris.
Hey, how we doing? Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, perfectly fine. How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Yep. all good. Just getting set up. I was sitting in front of the TV and I thought, what am I going to do for a couple of hours? And,
Well,
just pop on.
if you were in Spain, you'd be watching El Clásico, which is just
What's that on
started
tonight?
10 minutes ago. But other than that, Chris, I don't think we've ever sort of met in the internet, exchanged opinions or anything like that. Have
No,
we?
not other than on PageTune. Like messages back and forth on PageTune on certain topics, whatever it was. God, who knows, on the forums.
Yeah. Ooh, hang on. Where are you?
Live?
Yeah, other than home, obviously.
Yeah, in Northern Ireland. North
Northern
part of Ireland.
Ireland.
So,
All right, where about?
just outside Belfast. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I've been to Belfast before. Yeah, I visited.
Ah, very nice.
There. I stayed in the most bombed hotel in Europe.
Yes, indeed. They wear it like a badge. Thankfully, it hasn't been blown up in about 20 years or so. But they still put that over the door.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, what are you currently reading? I was asking Shadia before.
Shadia, yeah, I heard that. I just finished, because I'm doing a live stream tonight and because I'm woefully underprepared, the fourth book of the Expanse series, Cibola Burn.
Right.
Which I'll be talking about in about a couple of hours.
That's more kind of sci-fi stuff thing, isn't it?
At this point, I would say it's not even very much. It's supposed to be sci-fi, but it's like a space opera, which the more it goes into, the more you realize it's not really that sci-fi, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's more about the character relations and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of pulpy fun, I think, at this stage, rather than kind of like classic sci-fi.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, there must be something wrong with me because I'm really happy to buy into orcs, dragons, elves, fantasy. But as soon as you go sci-fi, I'm like, no, it's not for me. I don't like, and it must be weird, right?
Yeah, it's a weird one because like I haven't read loads of sci-fi, but most of the sci-fi that I'll do like tends to be the like stuffy, the stuff that I wouldn't think I would like, but it's like 200 odd pages though, and 200 pages never outstays its welcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
you just get to a point where like there's loads of ideas, and then okay, we're done, and you're like, great, I can put that down without having to draw it out over 600 pages or something, and you're like, oh man, this is heavy.
So more like Asimov and Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, things like that. Yeah, like the K. Dick ones are especially like those kind of novella-ish length that just jam-packed full of ideas, and you go, yeah, enjoyed that. And I don't even need that much of a story in it. You know, in some ways, like a bit of a story, a lot of ideas, something to make you think. Book done.
Yeah.
What about yourself? What are you reading?
So at the moment, I'm halfway through A Little Hatred. So the first book in the Age of Madness, because we're doing the read along.
That's right.
So that's there, and then I think when I finish that, I'm going to be reading the penultimate book in the Elric series, because one of the objectives for the year was to finish the Elric series.
Yes.
But I'm finding Elric is a very strange set of books. But I don't know. I don't know what your experiences with fantasy, booktube, whatever. A lot of the people that I see, watch, talk to, everyone seems to be reading stuff from 1995 onwards. Yeah. That's all that gets discussed, right? So kind of Wheel of Time is your cutoff point, and anything that came before, not very many people talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
And for I'm getting on in my years now. I started reading fantasy back in the 80s, so I'm very much old school, and I find a lot of modern fantasy is just not fantasy.
Yeah, it's like a hybrid genre with kind of magical elements of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep this for the conversation, but so far I'm 250 pages into Abercrombie's A Little Hatred. There's no fantasy at all. Nothing other than it's a made-up town in a made-up country in a made-up planet. But you could change the names to, it could be some sort of middle, pre-industrial revolution Europe, and it would work in exactly the same way. So
yeah, I
Go on.
wonder if that's a European thing, in that we kind of see the Europeanness in a lot of that stuff. Because I can think of a couple of things I've read, and they could just as well be medieval Britain or something like that, and but with very little fantastical elements in it. But because it's that made up world, people go to ascribe it as fantasy. Whereas I don't know, maybe because we're in Europe and we see the demographics of Europe and the places of Europe that are definitely a bit more historical in nature, we just kind of can ascribe a place to that.
Maybe, but I think maybe that's like, particularly in Abercrombie's case, I think it's very intentional because
Yeah,
the kind of the geography, the cultures that he presents are very much kind of, even the names are Italian sounding or Dutch sounding. He's got, the something von something, and he very much, I think he has explicitly sort of tried to make it that way. Whereas if you go more the American way, like Brent Weeks, Brandon Sanderson, they make more of an effort to take you to a different place.
it's another world. Yeah, and create that world. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
look at that, Williams, Duvel. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Duvel, and Guinness is a
Never had
classic.
Duvel now, but I do like a blonde beer.
I just had off screen. I had a Belgium 9% Bornum, so
Oh
those,
man.
which is, that's the thing with being diagnosed with this weird disease now. I don't know what to do with my life. It's
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like you're a bit like myself in that I don't drink a lot, but I like a beer.
well, because I've got, right. So basically, long story short, I've got epilepsy. I shouldn't drink, but right, we need our vices, and
Yeah, but
being a moderately responsible family man, you gotta choose your vices carefully. So if I'm gonna have 3 beers a week, I'm gonna make them good. I'm gonna spend my money on
for
them, and I'm
sure.
gonna enjoy. I'm not gonna be drinking San Miguel, right? So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, and you wanted the taste of something. You don't want like a 4% weak kind of like
well,
flavored water in
no,
a lot of cases.
but. So with that, because I lived in the UK for 21 years,
Hmm.
alcohol content is not necessarily doesn't necessarily correspond to a tastier beer. Like beers in the
For sure.
UK are typically between 3.5 to. It's rare to find an ale north of 5% or
Yeah,
five and
for
a
sure.
half.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, but I really like Belgium beer. I was there last summer, this summer gone, and it was a fantastic trip. It was, yeah, I had a very good time. And they could have said no wine. I would have been fine. They could have said, don't eat meat anymore. I would have been, yeah, cool, no
That's
problem.
okay.
Beer, it's a tough one.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd struggle most with losing out of my dad. I think I would miss meat for sure. Um, at least the option of meat would be something that I would go, oh,
Yeah, because I was talking to people at work this week gone, and yes, no wheat, and you stop to think about how many things have got wheat in them, right?
yeah, sure.
But it's the little things, because you go, having a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. In your case, I like to have a biscuit to go with it. Oh, you can't,
Hmm.
no biscuits, yeah, no, and it's the little things.
That would hurt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's the same thing, I suppose, with vegan and vegetarianism. Anything that milk products and stuff, you go, oh God, I could do without certain things. And then you go describe something else, you go, but that has milk in it as well. And you go, oh, I didn't think about that. That's a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. I did the whole vegan thing for slightly over a year, some time ago, and
Mm.
like I said, I'm not picky with food. So I did that quite well. But when it's not a conscious, voluntary thing, it just feels all the worse.
Yeah. I suppose when you've lived 40 years eating and drinking and living a certain way, to all of a sudden be told there's a hard line where you shouldn't do this anymore. It's like, right, okay, I need to retrain my brain as much as my body.
Yeah. But like the disbelief in my face, which was like, "You're celiac." I'm like, what? What are you talking about? So
Yeah.
yeah, your antibodies are through the roof. I said, okay. She goes, have you got any eating disorders? I'm like, no. And she's like, but you haven't got anemia. And I'm like, no, I'm a long distance runner. And she's like, well, but you're celiac. I was like, am I? And yeah, it was a strange situation.
Yeah, it's not totally similar, but I remember being a younger man and being diagnosed with color blindness and being, everybody looking around me. You started to feel the test that you used to do, and there's a crowd forming behind me, in the room because they were doing all the kids at the time. And everybody looking at me going, you must have known you problems with color. And I was like, I don't know. So they brought a book over and says, well, what color is that? And I'm like, that's red. And they go, it is red. How do you know it's red? What color is that? It's green. Oh, that is green. How do you know these things? And I was like, because I don't think I'm a problem with color, but it turns out it's the clashes of colors. Like rudimentary 80s science medicine is not what modern medicine is at all. So it's the fact that I could see colors by themselves, but actually the clash of some colors together would cause me problems for sure.
Yeah. Is that test, isn't it, where you got these colored dots all mixed together?
Couldn't see one of the numbers. Every single one. I was just guessing at 14. I've absolutely no idea.
Yeah. So I suppose being an electrician is another question for you, isn't it?
Well, again, I can see the difference in the colors of the wires. It's not a problem, but it's like if I would describe it like if I played snooker. Have you ever played snooker?
No, I understand the game, but
so when the lights are shining on top of colors like the reds, the greens, and the browns, and I'm down at that level and only seeing half the color, I have no idea which one's which at that stage. So I have to get up and I can walk around and look at it. Yeah.
I can see how that can be a bit of a problem for a snooker player.
Yeah, so I would have to get up and walk around the table and eyeball it quite closely and go, no, that one's green. Okay, we're back.
Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff. So, well, let's go back to books. What's your favorite fantasy series?
So you were talking about books don't exist before. Yeah, there's a couple of older and a lot of new there. So I'm a bit like yourself. I grew up reading fantasy in the 80s. And the options, there certainly wasn't the breadth of stuff that there seemed to be now. You were kind of Thomas Confident. You were talking about David Eddings, that kind of stuff. But for me, it was the Magician series and then the Rift War and then subsequently the Empire series with Johnny Wirtz. That series is my favorite. That series of 3 books, The Daughter of the Empire, Servant of the Empire, Mistress of the Empire, are by far and away the 3 favorite books I've ever read in my life.
Right. But you can imagine what it was like in Spain in the 80s. Like, not, we didn't have that much stuff because you got a translator and so on. So, when I was growing up, it was Earthsea, Lord of the Rings, and then because of Dungeons and Dragons, the role-playing game, all the stuff that came with it, Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance. But outside of that, there was some. I don't recall there being that much.
Yeah, it still exists now. The sci-fi fantasy parts of bookshops are tiny. Like we have a lot of bookshops, and I think we're quite lucky to have so. But you're talking about a single row of shelves even now, even with the breadth of choice that we have now. So back then, it was literally, you nearly stumbled on the one by accident that was just in the general fiction section, and you lifted the cover up, and you went, "Oh, there's somebody with a hat on the cover of this. He must be a wizard." Something like that. Yeah.
So I grew up in a medium-sized town, for Spanish standards, right? Excuse me. We had the one fantasy bookshop that sold comics, role-playing games, and fantasy books. And then obviously over time there were more, but there was just this one place, this one bookstore that any geek and freak, it was just the one place to go, and they had to cater for the avid Dungeons and Dragons player, to the comic book reader, to the fun, and it was a tiny bookstore. You couldn't fit more than 5 people in at the same time. So the choice was very, very limited.
But we used to have many years ago a traveling library used to go around. So it was like basically converted truck. I think it was one of those mobile shops that was converted into a mobile library. And in the early 90s, it traveled around. And again, they had maybe 10 books that were considered fantasy, and even some of that was sort of erotic fantasy and like the top shelf, which I really shouldn't have been anywhere near at the time. But you lifted it down because again, it had the smell or look about a fantasy book at the time, and you kind of made your way through all of those. So it was the Terry Brooks books were all in there as well. The Shannara series.
Even to this day, I mean, because I remember, it must have been 2000 and I think it was 2002 when I met Sir Terry Pratchett at my university in the UK, and his books were not being translated into Spanish. They were taking years to arrive, and even to this day, things like Brent Weeks, the Lightbringer series, I think books 4 and 5 still haven't made it.
Wow.
Excuse me, I keep coughing. They still haven't made it into Spanish. A lot of series, Joe Abercrombie again. If things don't do super well in the English language, then they just don't bother translating them here.
But is there a large fantasy, like of Spanish fantasy?
It's a good question. I don't know, because we only moved back 3 years ago. We've only been here since 2019. And if I used to live in a medium-sized town, now I live in a ring-a-ding town on the sea. So we've got no comic book stores. We don't have anything of the sort here. But there is something going on. I think there's an appetite for it, but because of the way we work, we're not like the most civilized European countries where, you go to places like, the Scandies, or you go to the Netherlands or places like that. People are fluent in English. They speak English,
that's
really
right,
well from a young age.
Much better than the English in some cases.
Right, isn't it? Whereas we're a bit more like Italy, France, where we have our language and everything has to be dubbed or translated into our language.
Yeah,
and I think that's a bit of a drawback for some things.
Yeah. Plus, I don't know, the times I've been to Spain, Italy, all that kind of stuff. The culture is very different. The kind of lifestyle, way people spend their time, especially in the evenings, was something that jumps out to me as being very different from, say, Northern Europe. Where it's obviously cold and dark and wet and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, my wife, she's still adjusting. But like last night was I've got 2 kids. One is 4, the other one is 7.
Okay.
We were out having dinner in the street, in the town square, and 11:30 at night, and the square is full of kids playing in the park, and we were just eating in a terrace in a bar, and to think that it's going to happen in Britain, isn't it? At no point in the year at 11:30 there would be a bunch of kids playing around.
7, 7:30, 8 o'clock's your cutoff point for any of that in Britain, really. It's get everybody home, get into bed, get the door locked.
Yeah.
Get the fire on would have been the old days, and
that's right.
But I found it very like that as well. There was no kind of cutoff time. It was just well into the evening. Whole families were out and socializing and just enjoying each other's company in a very relaxed kind of manner.
Yeah, I mean, that's the chief reason we moved, apart from the fact that we couldn't afford living anywhere near London, where we used to work, is that once my second son was born, I was like, no, we need to get out of here. Like, this is no place to raise 2 boys. And now we're here. I mean, sticking my wife, obviously we had the pandemic in between. She's London born and bred. But I think last week she said, she's got no regrets coming here, because 4 kids is just a fantastic place. They got so many things to do, and we always out and about, sports, everything, and it's just so much cheaper than what it would be in the UK,
especially around London. I mean, there's a lack of green places even to live.
Well,
it's very.
I think big cities across the world, I'm very negative on them, but a bit of anecdotal evidence. We're going back at Christmas, because obviously we have to go to visit my wife's family and all the stuff. And I have booked a restaurant for my wife and I. You know, these ones that you got to book months ahead because they are so popular, or whatever. I got a text message this week that because they cannot find serving staff, they cannot find waiters, they
Right,
had to
yeah.
close the restaurant. And it's like, no, the fact is that no waiter can make a living in London, and that's why you had to close the restaurant. Um, it's just crazy. It is
But
crazy.
it's the same for all those industries. You know, a living wage is people don't want to pay a living wage in a lot of industries, and you know they're making money and they're caught in this dilemma of there's a shortage of staff right throughout the city, and then it's survival of the fittest because then it's whoever will pay the wages and who won't will be where people work then, and there isn't much of a migrant population now in the UK for one reason or another, and
Yeah.
they sort of did it to themselves.
Yeah, yeah. That thing we don't talk about, right?
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Oh, Frisian. Is that some kind of Dutch dialect or something like that? How's your Gaelic?
Oh, mine terrible. Like all we get taught outside of it, if you study it or are brought up in like a familial setting where people speak it, is your prayers. That's it. Like I know my prayers in Irish, and that's it. I was taught
My
those when I was about 7, and that's it. But I do have family who are fluent for sure, but they kind of teach each other, send their kids to Irish schools, that kind of
okay.
stuff,
Because
to keep it going.
because like here in Spain, we've gone in my opinion, we've gone really far. So we've got different languages depending on which part you live in, right? So in
For sure.
Catalonia, they speak Catalan.
Ask. Yeah.
In the Basque Country, they speak Basque. In Galicia, they speak Galician. And so the region where I live, I cannot work in my profession because I don't speak the local dialect. It's like now it is a requirement if you're going to be a doctor or a teacher that I have to speak the local dialect. So even though, because I went to uni, I got all my qualifications in the UK, but even though I've got everything recognized and accepted by the Ministry of Education, because I do not speak the local dialect, I cannot work in a state
Wow.
school in my region where I live now. And and if I was go to live in Galicia, because I don't speak Galician, it'd be the same story, or the Basque Country, or
Wow.
and here the language immersion. In some parts of the country, 60% of the schooling is done in the local dialect.
Wow.
I know, right?
That's really surprising because it's absolutely nothing like that. In fact, it's somebody even say that Irish the Gaelic is a dead language aside from little pockets around the place because but like you were saying, like English being the predominant world language, you know, it's restrictive to speaking Irish in some ways, other than to keep the culture alive, keep the spirit of that alive. That people are obviously very keen to do that, but it's practically not a requirement in the same way that you're saying, to teach in state
Well,
schools you would need to have.
like I don't have anything against the local dialect and its heritage and all that sort of stuff. My
Hmm.
mother is from here, but by law, the kids have to learn it. So my children go to a British school here because my wife and I work there, and my kids are bilingual. Mom is English, so it makes sense for them to. But by law, they have to learn Valenciano, which is the local dialect. So my kids they go to a British school. 60% of the timetable is in English. They have to do some Spanish subjects because we're
Hmm.
in Spain, but then they have to learn Valenciano. So they got like the minimum that the school can get away with, and they have to learn the local dialect. But if they
It's
were in a
fascinating.
state school, up to 60% of their education would be in the local dialect.
Wow. That's such an interesting thought to have, and how different, schooling is, even within the continent of Europe. I'm sure it's wildly different in Germany. I'm sure it's wildly different again in France.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I, I, Interesting to actually find out about Dutch because obviously the Dutch are very famous for just being very multilingual.
I lived in Amsterdam for a few months. It was my company relocated me there, It was like, go there, we'll fire you. It's like, okay, I'll go there. And so I lived in Amsterdam for some months, and I functioned, without issues in English. I mean, I
Yeah.
shipped all my stuff, and one day I had to call the post office to collect a parcel. I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, what do I do? And I just called in English and sorted everything out. Everyone
Not,
speaks
not a
English.
problem. Yeah. I found that the
And
times that I've been in Amsterdam as well, there's absolutely no problem getting or doing anything at all. It's just very much, a very cosmopolitan society in general, I think. I've seen a lot of people from a lot of different countries there.
whereas Belgium is different. I think maybe there, because of the character, I don't know. They're a lot more. They speak Flemish. They speak French.
Hmm.
And even though when I was in Brussels this summer, um, it was a lot. It's a bit trickier to get by in English. But
Yeah. I have to make my journey to Belgium soon. I keep on talking about it with the wife and saying, we haven't been there. Been to a lot of other places around there, but never been to Belgium. And
if you're into beer, I mean, I had a whale of a time because I went on my own. I went on my own. I packed the kids and the wife off to London, and I took 5 days in traveling. And it's such a small country. Like,
yeah,
furthest place you're gonna go is an hour by train, and in 5 days there, really good time. And
yeah.
when you go to those classic tourist souvenir shops where
Hmm.
all they sell is pencils and fridge magnets. In Belgium, they sell beer and beer glasses. How brilliant is that?
Cater to the audience, maybe. I don't know. There's Shadi saying Shadi speaks English very well indeed.
Yeah. No. Absolutely.
Actually, I've got a good friend of mine. He's Romanian, but he lives in Belgium and again speaks perfect English as well. He lives and works there, and had moved there about 3 or 4 years ago. But again, perfect English.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
So what do you do for a living
I teach.
as well?
Haven't speaking of that, so I teach maths mainly,
Oh,
and but
same
mainly I
here.
work. Yeah, all right, but I work in adult education mainly, so I teach everybody and all, and usually people that have got a terrified, long-standing fear of the subject. So
Yeah.
I have the best job in the world, I
I was
think.
always curious about getting into that line of work. I never did. I've stayed with
Hmm.
teenagers,
Hmm.
hormonal teenagers. But I always thought that going into adult education would be possibly as, if not more rewarding, without the mental breakdowns and the fights that I have to go through on a daily
Yeah,
basis.
yeah. There's different challenges, of course, but the rewards are just off the charts because there's a whole lot of things I normally say to people, but there's not one person that sits in my class that was told to come to me. They came voluntarily. They
That's the
came for
big
a
thing, isn't it?
choice, and every time they go, they say, "Can I go to the toilet or something?" You know, the classic school thing. I always go, "Do you know what? If you don't like me for 5, just go out, go walk, go to the toilet, go for a smoke, go for a coffee, do whatever, walk outside, come back, try again tomorrow. We all have bad days, good days. These are all things that would happen, I suppose, in traditional school settings. But you don't need to ask my permission. You're a mother of 3 kids. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous that I would tell you can't do something. What are you talking about? Other than you not being respectful of other people within the learning community, their learning environment, that's one thing. But by and large, everything else is totally within your control. But
is
yeah,
that
it's phenomenally rewarding work, without doubt.
is that being a school mindset, isn't it?
Yes, it is. People
People,
calling me sir.
yeah.
I don't know who you're talking to. That's not me. Don't call me
Well,
sir.
we're always on the hunt for maths teachers. That they're a
Yeah.
rare breed. So you feel like relocating to warmer latitudes. We're always on the hunt.
We have the skills. I like the freedom in my job to not have to teach to a state curriculum, if that makes sense. So I
Yeah.
get the design. I have an exam that I needed to pass at the end of the year, but how I go about that is completely up to myself. So I have designed a very nice curriculum to teach that is not necessarily a bit boring or, kind of that kind of structure that kind of go off the rails every now and again and teach people in the way that I want to teach them.
Yeah,
Which is a lot of fun. So I
can
teach them from the ground up. We start with addition, subtraction, and my first 5 lessons are what I call the students. You'll probably appreciate this: the greatest lies that have ever been told, which is all of the horrible ways and instruction the kids are given about their basic rudimentary skills and the things that are reinforced, certainly in English state education, about how you're supposed to think and perceive number. And it's great just pulling them apart and going, actually, that's not really how this works, and retraining their brains.
Guys, it is weird. It is difficult. It is eye-opening. And is it the same with adults? Because, like, I always tell my kids, I was having this conversation with them on Friday. I said, do not believe whenever anyone tells you there's no difference between boys and girls. I said, do not believe that. I said, right now we could do the test. I could pick 5 exercise books from 5 girls, blindfolded. I could pick 5 from 5 boys. I will show them to you, no name. And I said, and I'm sure all of you will be able to put all the boys on the one pile and all the girls on the other pile, isn't it?
Yeah, they create very different learning environments because traditionally the adult education space, for benefits reasons, is very female dominated. Kids go to school, mums tend to be the primary carers, and the mum all of a sudden has some time during the day, and they have an opportunity to go back to education. And all it takes is to put 1 or 2 males into that learning environment, and the whole learning environment has changed. There's not a level of competition until you put, this is generalization, of course, you put males in. You put a couple of males in the learning environment, and all of a sudden the competition between males and females happens. The competition is between males and males off the chart, and the mix is what makes a great learning environment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the accepted literature is that boys do better in a mixed environment.
Yeah, for sure.
And girls do better in a single-sex environment.
A
square in that circle is it's never going to happen. But yeah.
But the boys and girls thing, there's no doubt. I think boys especially have a propensity, especially those that can do or cannot do, the propensity to have cottoned on to mental maths as a way to do maths properly. This kind of, there's almost like a competition in the head. And certainly I suffered from it, to say there's like a badge to be won by never writing anything down or never presenting or using this thing to do, right?
Yes.
If I can do this in my head and I can show you can do it in my head, I'm better than everybody else, which is nonsense, of course. But the retraining the brain to actually say, that's fine. You will get to a point in your life where you'll go, your brain just can't juggle that much information. You need to use an aid or paper or something to help you at that last couple of steps.
It's the eternal fight, isn't it? I've seen it many times with kids where, particularly boys, actually it's always boys, they get by on mental ability and mental sharpness up until they are 12, 13. And then soon as whatever we're doing gets a bit more complicated, where you need pen and paper to keep track of your process, I've seen those boys fall off the cliff because they just refuse the pen and paper. And it's like, mate, there's no chance you can see this through without keeping track step by step. But
yeah, it's that multi-step thinking that starts to happen around 13, 14, around that age, and they just go, and invariably what those boys come away with thinking, it's me that's the problem, rather than how they're approaching something. They just go, I've reached the limits of my intelligence or whatever that may be. And I should still be able to do all this in my head, but actually I can't, so therefore I'm stupid, or I'm not as good at maths as I thought. And that's still an awful lot of maths is a debilitating subject, because I often say it's the one subject you can know exactly what you're doing but get the wrong answer, actually, as it turns out at the end.
I actually do hold the belief, I'm sure you'll agree with me, maths is the one subject where we all reach a point where it stops making sense. There's it starts to get more and more complicated. And hopefully, for most people, that happens after the age of 18. But unfortunately, for some people, it doesn't. Unfortunately, for some people, it happens halfway between 15 and 16. And that's when you got the problem, and so on. But, I think we all reach a point where it's just too abstract. It's just too weird. It just gets too complicated.
Well, that happens to even me. There's a point that I can go into maths lecture and go, I am so lost. And this is my field of speciality. So, I can catch up. What is happening here? I feel out of my depth. I need to go back and break it down or do whatever. But I think I heard somebody saying not that long ago, the reason that people either dislike or especially like maths, people say, oh, you like maths because you find it easy. I think an awful lot of people who really like maths like it because it's tough. They like the challenge. They like the problem of it. Hey, Theo.
Yeah, I've got a kid now that I'm preparing, so helping. He's applying to Oxford. He's one of those ones that you get one every 10 years or something like that. And this boy, he's just like, he wants to know where he won't take anything for granted. It's like, you show him a formula, and he's like, where does that come from? Why does that work? It's like, oh wow, okay. I said, let me go and think about this. I'll get back to you.
But even you as the teacher there, the easy thing would be just to say, oh, because, but I'm sure you want to know as much as the student actually, where does this come from, or where's the genesis of this come from, or why does it make sense? Okay, often.
No, absolutely. And in there, I'm not proud enough to admit that I don't know something.
Exactly. That's the key, really.
And I think, you gain the respect from the kids when you say, look, but in a natural, because I don't know what the difference is. If you say to a kid, I don't know, some kids will go, well, you're not a very good teacher. I've never had that reaction. I think they've always accepted that if I didn't know something, I will come back with an answer the following day or 2 days later. But I don't know, because I've seen it with some people, that some kids just switch off from a teacher because they don't rate them or they don't think that teacher is good enough. Unfortunately, I've never had that problem.
I've seen the other way. When I used to teach what would be considered the level 3 maths, level 4 maths, I never prepared solutions and had them on me. When you're going through a solution or something, you would have ones you made earlier and put them up on the board, because I want kids, especially of that level, to see that an answer just doesn't always come immediately. You kind of go through the process. You do what you normally do, and about some way through the question, you go, I know exactly where I'm going to do this. They've got to see that process so that they can replicate that, and they don't just think, oh God, I can't do this because I'm not smart enough. No, there's skills that you're going to work through and then use those skills. And sometimes you'll get stuck and you go, oh, I'll go back and start again. I've obviously missed something or something like that.
No, you're absolutely right. Particularly when I'm teaching, I don't know what's the year 13. So the year before university, when you get to that level, the kids go, how did you do this? And I'm looking at it. And I said, I don't know. I said, but I will start doing this and see where it takes me. I said, sometimes, and they, oh, but it looks like a mess. I said, but you're going to work through it, and eventually the pieces fall into place. But it's give them the confidence to just take on something and see it through to the end, and no matter how ugly it might look.
Yeah, and be prepared to fail. Like, don't be afraid of getting so far down the line and going, oh, it's not right. And then thinking, oh, God, this is a disaster. You go, no, let's go back and start again. I feel like I know what I'm doing. I feel like I've got skills. Let's go and use them.
Yeah. Cool. But and it's really weird sometimes when you go from teaching 11-year-olds to 17-year-olds in the space of 1 hour, isn't it?
Yeah. From my point of view, like, I was going from teaching, people how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then going in and teaching people calculus or something, within the space of an hour. But it's the mix that makes it fun, because you're using slightly different language, using slightly different skills, using different techniques to relate to no matter who it is you're speaking to, and getting to know your
Yeah.
students and what lights the fire underneath them. I think that stuff's all important.
And what I like about the job is that, you know, the most modern thing we teach was discovered, what, 350 years ago?
Yeah,
And every year we teach, maths never changes, right? Any other
for sure.
subject, they may change the curriculum. In English, they may pick a different book. In history, they may focus on a different, but we always teach the same thing: trigonometry, Pythagoras theorem,
Yep.
algebra. But, and you know what the questions are going to be as well.
Yeah.
Every year, the kids are going to fall, or the adults are going to fall at the same hurdle at the same point. But because the mix of people is different, it does not get boring. It's always interesting and it's always exciting, even though you're teaching the same thing time and time again.
Yeah. And it's exactly as Theo's saying there, see how the basics relate to something more complicated. If you teach, and this is where my job is just so awesome, because I get to teach the basics again with an eye to someday you're going to use this for something way beyond what you're going to do. But if I do my job right and explaining how number works and how these logical thinking works and all that kind of stuff, you'll be able to go, oh yeah, this all actually makes sense, rather than just giving somebody a method of, to get the right answer, you do this, 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 and this. You get them to problem solve it and break it down.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, my job's the best in the world. It's just the greatest thing. I bounce it up and go into work every day. There's no doubt.
I used to. I mean, teaching is my second career. I
Mine
used to.
too.
I used to work in finance before, until one day, I think it was my birthday, my 28th birthday, and I just one day got up and left. I said, this is it. I cannot be bothered with this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and since becoming a teacher, I took what, more than a 50% pay cut, right? I
For
left a
sure.
job in I left a job in the city in London to become a flipping maths teacher, right?
And people are
But
saying they thought you were good at maths, and you did that. But
I suppose I think the way my dad put it, he said, you change a racing car for a bus or something like that. And I said, well, you know, but that's what's allowed me actually to move back to Spain
yeah,
to do something different
it's
for my
just like you
kids.
were saying. I mean, if I could learn how to speak Spanish, I could, or any language, I can travel around the world and kind of work, because people will always need math teachers, and there's never enough of them.
No, but this is. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think you and I know that teaching is a black hole of money and resources, right? It
Yeah,
doesn't
for
matter how
sure. Yeah.
much you know. I've worked in UK schools for 8 years. I know full well that you could pay teachers triple what they earn. You could give schools double the budget, and results would marginally change.
100% correct. Yes.
So, but equally, you got countries like Finland, um, places like that, where they rethought the whole system, and they're doing far better than they used to.
Yeah, it's about the structure and the way that you go about approaching the whole thing holistically, rather than kind of using the conveyor belt that the UK system certainly is that you reach a certain age and you should do this, and by this age you should do this. The kind of what was based in the Industrial Revolution is that at 18 or 16 kids need to go out and work. We need new bodies in the workplace at 16 to 18. We need another set of bodies better qualified at 18. So therefore, these are the time scales that we'll have to work on, which thankfully is something that I work outside of those time scales. But that's how the UK system is built.
Yeah, yeah. And I thought, I mean, I don't know. I think every other system in Europe is similar, but I always thought that maybe you don't differentiate kids by age, but by ability.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Because I mean, did you ever work in mainstream education with kids or?
No, never at all. A second career for me, so I just kind of schools. schools wouldn't have me with the qualifications that I had at that stage because the rules for going to teaching in school were very strenuous. You had to have your teaching qualification before you could go in teaching, whereas in FE or further education, you needed the competence first,
Right.
and then the teaching qualification would come afterwards. So I could go in and show that I could teach and work on my craft of teaching before I actually did the teaching qualification. So I have taught in school settings. So as a lecturer in our college, we went in and taught in schools. So I'm not really afraid of going to teach 12, 13, 14, whatever year old, teaching maths is teaching maths in a lot of ways. And your people skills is what gets you through no matter who you're teaching, So I don't think I'd want to try it though as a full-time career, because how could I give up a setting where people choose to come to one that they're made to go, that kind of the set them out. I think I can do a good job, but at the same stage, I don't think the rewards are the same in the job.
No.
The things that I get out of my job are not going to be the same ones that I get out of working at state school or otherwise.
No. I wouldn't. I mean, we all know teaching is a vocation, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So, within that, because like I talk to my colleagues in primary, and it's like, I would never get anywhere near a primary classroom. And they look at me and they go, I would never get anywhere near a secondary classroom. So, within that, like my wife, she was also a secondary maths teacher. But last year, she had to do a bit of primary teaching, and she hated it. She positively couldn't stand it.
My wife's a primary school teacher. That's what she does. I would give the other one a go. I would give university a go. Because I think of skills that could work quite well there, because HE, especially in and around me, that lecture thing, there's not very much teaching that goes on or good quality instruction. It's just delivering information and away you go and working it yourself. I definitely think there's a market or an availability for somebody that's going to take, especially in non-math subjects, so teaching social scientists about stats, people who aren't naturally disposed to think like mathematical ways, and how to teach them properly. I think that's something I would like to give a go someday.
Yeah, no, I'm a stack now, because obviously I work in a private school, so I get a whopping discount on the 2 kids. And if I was ever to leave, I would have to take the kids out of the school. So they got me. They got me for the next
15 years.
Another 13. Yeah, the older one has got 10 more years. The little one has got another 13, but it's
but it is, but like Theo says in the comments there, it's a job where you get to influence a lot of lives, regardless of what level you teach at. You can really make a difference if you can grab 1 or 2 a year even, and you see those ones through to the end, and they kind of go, right, I've got something to build on for the next year, whether they're with you or not. They kind of go, right, I feel like I've done a decent job there and help that person along the road.
It is strange. It is very strange. Right. Okay. Question completely. Yes, just completely got off topic here. Just looking at your shelves there at the back. What are those brown books there at the top on your left? Is that a series?
On my left. So this side, or
so on the shelf just behind you, just above your head, the brown.
Yes. Oh, they're not books. Those ones there you're talking about?
Yeah.
They're not books. They are DVDs.
Oh.
And they are Star Trek Voyager DVD box sets.
All right.
And funny enough, I was doing an interview with Jim Mulburn, the author, not that long ago, and he was in the camera and was doing the same thing, and he picked exactly those out as well. So, what's that? What is that?
I was a bit concerned. It looked like a Wheel of Time edition, so I was a bit concerned.
Wheel of Time are down there.
Okay. I have to come clean, Chris.
Oh, I know.
I positively despise the Wheel of Time.
Well, I've only got up to book 11 there.
Well, you're almost there then, isn't it?
Well, I'm almost there, but I was reading them as they were coming out. And at the time when I stopped, reading. I was positively pissed off with that series of nothing happening for a very long time. So anybody
Yes.
that has fallen out of it, then I completely understand. And at the time when I stopped, there was no prospect of it even finishing. So I was like, I can smell being let down very badly here. So I stopped. And I actually stopped at 10. I think I bought 11 and never went back.
I made a video when I finished it.
Yeah.
So I made a video. I think it's titled like "Why something like the Wheel of Time sucks and you know it, right?" and someone, and even Wheel of Time fans kind of agree with me, like they are aware of the shock, and you know what, I can accept that you acknowledge that something is flawed in many ways, but you still like it because of whatever reasons. But there was this guy, and he posted these 3 long comments that I actually copied into a Word document, and I'm toying with the idea of making a video just reading what he wrote because he had me in stitches about how rubbish and how the whole thing. Like I couldn't even. I mean, this lady's present here, so I couldn't repeat all the things he said. But I so want everyone to read that because it is true and B, it's just hilarious the way he just talked about the Wheel of Time and the characters and the whole sexual innuendo that that runs under the whole series.
See, the thing that I find is because when I started it, it was very much a bit like you were saying. At a certain point, there wasn't that much choice. There wasn't a lot of different things like there are now. There are any number of series you go. Everybody goes, this series is great. This series is great. This start one and away you go. But back then, like proper epic fantasy, there wasn't, to my mind, an awful lot available for me to pick from. So actually, when I started reading The World Book One, I was like, well, this is really, really properly epic in a way that even the Shannara series wasn't or anything like that. And while it would take 3 pages from describe pulling out a sword and how it glinted across the moonlight and how the landscape changed when he looked at the reflection in the sword and all of that kind of stuff, I learned how to scan read an awful lot of that stuff. I just kind of go, right, I actually don't even want to read this. Maybe an older version of myself might want to, but I can't really imagine that I would. But I love the scale of it. But then by the time you get to book 5, 6, and you're talking about, right,
Every woman is crossing their arms under the breasts, isn't it? There's breasts in every other page. It's awful,
and everybody's angry. Like the
yeah.
females are right, the men are angry. Like everybody's angry in this book about something, and there's also this idea. Okay, there's a big bad, the dark one, but there are also these like mid-tier bosses. I was just using computer game language in my head to say, right, I've got 7 mini bosses to beat before I even get the thing, and I'm kind of like, I'm on book 7 and I've only met 2 of them. That means there's going to be 30 books in this, and I don't know if I can do it.
But I think, like, I don't rate the series at all, and I still don't understand why it's so popular. And the first book, I think, is probably the most palatable out of all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a big bait and switch because it starts being something. And after book 3, the whole series just disappears up its own backside into people talk. It's just people talking, and that's it. People talk,
and it's not even the same people talk. It's kind of the same problem I have with the Expanse to a certain degree. At a certain point, when you put more and more and more characters on it, it loses kind of a core of what it is. And same with the Expanse. They have a couple of certain core characters, but when you see perspectives from different people every single book, new characters put on, and it means that if you ever have a coincidence, this person reappears, you go, well, this is unlikely to happen. Look how many people are in this world. This doesn't make any sense. I don't hate the Wheel of Time. I can understand why people like it because obviously I made it 10 books, but at the same stage, like you, I'm surprised it's as popular as it is.
I'm not entirely sure, and I don't know enough. I'm not, the best read person in the world. I just don't want to buy the argument that the fantasy landscape was so poor that the Wheel of Time was the best thing around at the time. I cannot. I mean, it must have been really dire if that was the best thing available at the time.
It certainly was for me because I tried reading Thomas Covenant, for instance, couldn't get into Thomas Covenant. It was very I don't know. I even think it was probably even the covers missold it to me. At the time, there really wasn't an awful lot to read. At the time, like Robin Hood was only getting started at that time, and I hadn't really gone down that. And hers is very different anyway.
Yeah,
Hers is
there
very
was only,
wistful.
I think there was only a couple of years between the first Wheel
There
of
was.
Time and the first Robin Hood book, isn't
There
it?
is. There are a few
And
years.
I rate Realm of the Otherlings a million steps higher than Wheel of Time.
Yeah, John's right. I can't think of too much. David Eddings, the Riven Codex, Thomas Covenant,
What
Wheel of
about
Time.
who's it? What's it called? Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, the Dragonbone Chair. Is that
Yeah, the
Pat
Tad
Williams?
Williams.
Yeah.
That wasn't on my bookshelves at the time, because the first Tad Williams thing that I ever read was actually Otherland sometime in the, was that 90s? Might have been late early 2000s. Was the first Tad Williams that I ever seen. And actually, Chaddy is exactly right. There's not the recommendations of the internet. You basically walked in either to your library or your bookshop and you went, what is there? And like I said earlier on, yeah, in some cases there wasn't a fantasy section, so you're really scanning the fiction section to see if you could find a fantasy sort of title or book. And once you found one by one author, you just kind of read your way through that entire series or that entire author's work if you could.
And maybe that coincided as well with the collapse of Dungeons and Dragons / TSR, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dragonlance was pretty much done and dusted by then. Forgotten Realms, I think, was also maybe suffering from burnout, because the first Icewind Dale trilogy is from '88.
Yeah.
So I think that was done. So we had the tail end of the Dungeons and Dragons craze of the '80s. And yeah, maybe there was a void.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of the other things that people were looking at the time. They're that's like it's the Make Your Own Story, one of the Steve Jackson and Livingston books. They were all about at that stage too, and they weren't even really. They were gimmicky rather than well written tales or coherent narratives or anything. So yeah, to me, I just remember thinking, right, well, I'll have to give this a go because I consider myself to be a fantasy book fan, and these seem to be there's like 6-7 books in this series or something when I started, and okay, I'm have to give this a go. And once you'd read one, you kind of went, well, I'm in. I really don't know what else to go to.
And but that was like crazy silly me. I did as part of a read along last year, and a book has to be really, really awful for me to just drop it and not finish it.
Yeah.
So it was like being stubborn. I'm just going to finish this series so I can actually say that I really can't stand it and how rubbish it is, like with reason.
Yeah, but hate reading or hate watching something is an experience in its own right.
Yeah, but it's funny how. So you haven't read the Brandon Sanderson, the last 3 books in Wheel of Time, right?
No, haven't.
Because once Sanderson takes over, all of a sudden, you start not reading about how much lace people wear on their cuffs. All of a sudden, women stop crossing their arms under the breasts, and all of a sudden, Nynaeve stops tugging at her braid.
Right.
Like
yeah.
It's like he knew that was shit, basically, and he was just tasked to finish the series in a satisfying manner. But I didn't even know why he accepted to do it.
Money must have been, really. And to be honest, it was. See, I actually haven't heard this because I kind of switch off the Wheel of Time argument around the same time that I stopped reading. So I had kind of thought that they were quite well received, but it's interesting to hear that they are not.
Well, I think I am in a small minority in BookTube that thinks that they are rubbish. I'm gonna say I've always tried to not name names here, but obviously he doesn't know I exist and it doesn't matter. But I blame Daniel Green for a lot of the harm that he's causing in the fantasy community there by bigging up the Wheel of Time. Because I was aware of his channel and I used to watch. I was like, so I went into the Wheel of Time expecting, something great. And the first book, it was like, oh yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
And it was just a downhill, non-stop, no breaks slide. It was awful.
Well, the one thing to say, they're definitely not easy reads. They're not easy to read in any way, shape, or form. And if anybody's going to make an entry into fantasy, they should be nowhere near something that's as dense and as unwieldy as a Wheel of Time book.
I don't know how. I don't like those kind of videos where people how to get into fan, like maybe it's my mindset. I don't decide to get into something. I don't decide today that I'm going to become a golf connoisseur and how do I get into golf. I think you naturally fall into things and the things you like, and everyone's entry point is different. I don't know that anyone is out there making the conscious decision, oh, I'm gonna read fantasy. What should I read? Or what should be my first step in?
I'm not so sure about that. My wife, because I was reading fantasy when I met my wife, and she read a lot of. She was reading Wilbur Smith, so she was reading historical fiction, which is actually closer than I think I appreciated at the time. And she had said, "Right, recommend me a book. If I wanted to see what was good about this genre, give me something that I would read." And I give her Raymond D. Feist's Magician, and she absolutely couldn't get over how well written it was and how compelling the story was, and the kind of world that it went with it. So she did go out of her way to say, right, give me an insight into what you get joy out of. And while she still doesn't read a lot of fantasy, she just mixes it into a rotation a bit like anything else.
But I suppose the genre now is so much wider than it was 20 years ago.
Oh, for sure.
That I mean, now I'm reading. I mean, Joe Abercrombie. I made a point in a couple of reviews. I don't think we talked about it before. I don't think he's a fantasy writer. There's very little fantasy. Like modern fantasy has moved away from fantasy. It's almost like pseudo historical fiction.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
And I miss. I mean, whatever happened to elves? Why can't we have elves anymore in fantasy?
Tolkien ruined elves. Tolkien and The Witcher ruined elves. I think that was that. Yeah, but it was that Dungeons and Dragons archetype though, wasn't it? You know, had the dwarves, you had the elves, you had the magicians, you had the humans, you had there had to be some of those to be a fantasy novel, whereas it's all really characters, isn't it? At the end of the day, whether they're all humanoid or they're all
but I suppose I mean I find there is a certain amount of disdain for that sort of more classic fantasy, for want of a better expression. But I think in a sense it made world building easier because go back to Wheel of Time, some of the Brian McClellan stuff, some was it John Gwynne. It's very difficult to build an expansive, differentiated world with all human races.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas when you've got the elves, you've got the dwarves, you've got orcs, you've got all that kind of stuff, I think it's far easier to create a bigger, more diverse, more, you're reading Lord of the Rings, and when they go to Moria, or they go to Lorien, or they go to the Shire, you do get the feel straight away that it's a much richer world.
Plus, it's easier to ask the questions of what's different about this culture. If they're all humanoid, you broadly assume that they're the same, or that they are, broadly speaking, interested in the same thing. Whereas if they go to another area and there's a different race there, then you're already on the lookout for, well, what is their culture like? What do they do? You're wary. There's a natural apprehension that's caused by that, or the good or the bad. Whereas if they're all humanoid, it's sort of assumed that it's like a modern world and that people generally just want the same things. Steady, stable family life, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yes, more dwarves, more orcs, more elves, more thieves, more rogues.
I miss that. I
miss rogue characters. There don't seem to be very many of those.
Have you? Unfortunately, that Gentlemen Bastards by Scott Lynch.
I haven't read it. I like Lochinvar, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. Particularly the first book, absolutely brilliant. It's a bit like Ocean's 11 meets Game of Thrones type thing.
Okay.
So
There's a
yeah.
book, back of the book quote.
Sorry, say that again. It's a
That's the back of the book quote. Ocean's 11 meets Game of Thrones in that
is it
order.
possibly? No, possibly. The problem is Scott Lynch has had a fairly turbulent personal life. But from what I understand, the fourth book is with the publisher, so it should come out next year. I'm quite excited about it. But
Excellent.
again, that's another very low fantasy. Again, sort of, when I read the first book, it's like, I am in Venice. Like, let's not kid ourselves here. I am in Venice, and so on. But he does construct this. It's like a heist movie, and I think that's always got appeal for me, at least.
Oh, for sure. And if they do that within a rogue character, and a rogue character that's just a rogue character, not magical rogue, like I suppose Vin in Mistborn, sort of a rogue-like character, but it turns out isn't just a rogue. It kind of loses that.
I didn't write Mistborn either. Again, I think the problem with this everything is that it's where your expectations are set, and everyone was waxing lyrical about Brandon Sanderson. So I picked Mistborn. I was like, "Is this it?" To me, it's just another one of many fantasy trilogies. There's nothing. I mean, I was impressed. The best thing about it was the magic system, but that's not enough to carry. That's not enough to carry a series, isn't it?
Yeah, I like Mistborn quite a bit, but like, be aware of what it is and what it isn't. I mean, I think it's a good entry point because I think it is very easy to read. It's very page turny. It's reasonably well plotted. There's lots of stuff that kind of happens in it. There's lots of the bits that could do without in it, but again, that's part and parcel of I think that genre that's sort of skirting YA-ish kind of stuff that you go into that knowing what you're getting. I think it's a pretty solid read. I mean, if my kids come to me and say at 15, right, give me a fantasy book to read, I'd probably give them Mistborn.
I'll give them Chronicles of the Dragonlance. But
I'll give them both and then see which one they come back and we'll report back.
Obviously.
We'll do a video on it and say who wins, me or Jose.
Because because the reason I've got pending, he doesn't know it yet, but I've got pending a live chat with Ian from B&B Books, because we did the read along of the Wheel of Time together. So we endured and suffered that. So we were thinking that next year we will take on another big series. But my idea was we will have a chat and decide live on a live chat which series to pick. Whether we were going to pick Stormlight Archive or Malazan or sort of whatever,
whichever big series it is.
We narrow it down. And the things that I don't know, again, Stormlight Archive is because of the experience with Mistborn. But I don't know. Again, it could be better.
There you go. The Hobbit's not a bad call. I mean, I read Fellowship of the Ring fairly early on too. And Fellowship was great, and Two Towers, when I read it about 12 years old or 13 years old, I was like, no, I didn't care about the world building, the Tom Bombadil, etc. I was like, this is just garbage. Why do I want to be reading all this stuff? The stuff that people appreciate as they get older. But the Hobbit's a pretty good shout as well.
I've said this a couple of times before. Once, because I was always a keen reader, I think at one point my parents got fed up of buying me books. It was getting too costly, so they got me a library card. And the first book I picked up from the library was The Hobbit. And I read it in one sitting that afternoon / evening. But I think for kids it's brilliant because the tone of the book as well is clearly meant to be for early teenagers, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
a shift in
Yeah.
tone between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, apart from a 20-year gap in between writing one and the others.
Yeah.
But
You're probably much the same as me, Jose, in that fantasy books sort of initially appealed to me because I was such a voracious reader. I thought a really long book will last me a really long time. You know, there's big chunky books.
yeah,
Yeah, nobody else was giving me books that length to read in any other genre at that time. And I went, well, if we could get into these, and there's like a series of 5 of them, God, this will take me forever. So I think that's one of the reasons that attracted me to fantasy in the first place. And then I read them, was like, oh, this is really cool.
well, in my case, it was more because I really I hated competitive games.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I was too afraid to lose. Maybe I was too shy to show lack of skill. Like, I really positively hated competitive games with my friends. I didn't want to play Monopoly with other people. I never wanted to play, in the arcades.
Yeah,
What was it? Street Fighter. I
Street Fighter.
hated.
Yeah,
And then when I discovered role-playing games, it was like, yeah, everyone works together. I love that. That's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to work with my friends for the common goal. So I played the hell out of Dungeons and Dragons. It became my life. It became like Friday afternoon as soon as school was over, stop playing
that's
Dungeons
so
and
good.
Dragons. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, And then when I discovered the Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, it's like, oh my god, this book's about
Those
this.
books. Yeah.
And it was just it just grew from there. Um,
And now
and
you
then
stream on Saturday nights on YouTube talking about books.
yeah, well,
That's where it goes. Yeah.
yeah, that's what happens. You find yourself the other side of 40, 2 kids, and I'm still
Yeah.
reading bloody I don't know. It's a strange world.
Oh, you like what you like. You know, it's one of those things. I think a lot of people say this as they get older. We don't actually really change that much from when we were at our young boys or others. We still like the same things. I still like football.
I think I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to still I just reconnected with role playing games through Discord, because here,
Mm-hmm.
fat chance of playing, but online I can. So I played a bit
For sure.
a couple of months ago, and now I'm going to embark on a 2-year campaign. So we play a couple of hours every evening, and again I realized it's all people like me that we did it when we were teenagers, and all the people I play with, we start playing at 10 in the evening because we're all family people. Once the wife and kids are in bed, that's when we start
Yeah. We
playing.
have our
And
me time. Yeah.
yeah. And I think it's I feel I don't want to say I feel sorry, but I feel sad for people that stop doing what they enjoyed. And like you said, I carried on reading fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
I never stopped. Um,
Yeah, I definitely find that. Like I look at some people, especially when they have kids, etc. They just eschew all version of their own lives away for working and looking after the kids. But the kids do go to bed at 7, 8, or whatever as they get older, and then they just get in the way of, well, I'll just go to bed then, and okay, like I get it, but at a certain stage, you've got to find something else that's not that is your life, because at some stage those kids are going to be away. If we do our jobs right, then they will disappear at some stage.
Sooner rather than later, no?
Yeah. I keep on joking with my kids. My kids are 12 and 14. And I said, like, honestly, there'll be none of this hanging about in my house at 25. Like you.
Yeah. No, but it is true. I mean, kids are a life changer. Before my first one, I used to, I was running, 4 or 5 days a week, and
Yeah.
when my first one was born, I was like, no, I need to stop. I need to be a father now. Da, 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 da. And I stopped running for 3 months, and after that, it's like, no, I need to do what I need to do. And as they get older, and you start getting your time back,
Mm-hmm.
you still gotta remain. You cannot lose yourself, basically. Having said that, you know, I'm not going to tell you something you don't know. We've got a lot less time for those things than we did
For
before.
sure. Yeah.
So when I see all these people, oh, I read 30 books this month, I was like, oh, I read one or two, and that's a good month for me.
I have times when I read more, but I'm a pretty solid 2 book a month person at the moment, and I'm quite happy with that because I'm usually picky and careful about what I read. So I read 2 good books a month, or I read 2 books that I'm going to end up talking about or sharing experiences with other people about. Something that I'm going to get enjoyment out of it, even if the book's terrible. I'm going to talk about it and kind of maybe get some new insight into it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's again possibly one of the things that annoy me about the Wheel of Time. You see, you got these brick books, and if I'm gonna read 800 pages a month, it better be good. I gotta make it count, which is kind of what puts me off, like picking a big series now. Breaks like Stormlight or Malazan or whatever it is. I don't want to be reading one of those a month and not really enjoy
not
as
getting
much.
anything out of it. Yeah, for sure. Although I kind of like Steve's approach at the moment, which is 4 chapters at a time, and breaking up and discuss the 4 chapters that he's doing with Prince of Nothing series, and I think he's going to do with Malazan going forward as well.
I mean, each to their own and so on. I don't know that I can read 4 books at a time. I don't think I've ever done it.
No, 4 chapters at a time and then discuss. So he's busy every week. You read 4 chapters of a single book.
But he's reading.
Oh, he's reading multiple things. Yeah.
Multiple books.
Oh, I can't do that either.
Yeah, that's right. So for me, it's like, I'd rather get this done, move on to the next one.
I tried it for a while, and I was like, yeah, okay, but what happens is at a certain point the book gets good, and the other book doesn't exist. Yeah. And then you've just spent 2 weeks without reading that other book. So I just got in the habit, right? I just read 1 book at a time now. That's it.
Yeah.
It's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, because I don't know what's it like for you. I mean, sorry, because have you got a channel, Dan?
Yes, I do.
Right, because part of the reason I was going to talk to Jolien tonight was that she had a bit of burnout about BookTube and stuff like that. And I think there's a slightly, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it nocive? There's a slightly negative side to BookTube. I think it can get a bit competitive. It can get a little bit sort of keeping up with the Joneses type thing.
Or I need to be doing this to make content,
Yeah. Hey, Ian, welcome. So Ian, I was telling you before, Ian doesn't know.
His ears were burning. Yeah.
He doesn't know, but in November we will be choosing our fantasy series for 2023. But he doesn't know it yet. But he'll be getting an email soon to put a date, and we'll have a chat. But yeah, I mean, do you find that, or are you fortunate to be middle-aged enough and have enough responsibilities to take it for what it is?
Yeah, I'm very much in that latter category. When everybody starts, I think they have this idea, oh God, my content will be good. But after about 6 months, I was like, nobody really watches anything that I make. And so you've got to look at it and go, right, why am I doing it? Why do you want to make videos? Because I'm about 2.5 years into a channel now with 200 odd subscribers. Because I'm not taking over the world at any stage, but I like making videos and the process of thinking about things and then putting something out. And whether somebody watches it or not is neither here nor there. I very rarely promote anything that I ever make because it's not really about promoting it and growing the channel and all that. If that stuff happens, great. But it's more about having the opportunity just to think about the stuff that I consume. Because I do books and I do movies. In fact, I probably do more movies than I do books, even though I like both. So, but I just like to talk about things. And the nice things that happen about this are things like this, meeting people with similar ideas, similar conversations. And who cares? I have 280 subscribers, whatever, but I get to have those conversations. And that's the bit that's cool. So if I do it for another 10 years and I have 300 subscribers by that stage, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. And I'll go weeks on end without releasing a video because I was just busy at that time. I didn't feel the need to have to put something out all the time.
I know I am with you 100% there. I don't I don't even know why I started it. I discovered that this booktube thing existed back in 2019 when I was moving countries, and I was watching these videos at home, and my wife was like, "You could do that," and I was like, "Could I?" But it's all done. I said, "It's all there. Like, I'm not going to be adding anything new." But I am with you there. It's the opportunity to have these conversations, to meet people, to discuss these things, and that's really, for me, the value out of it. And I've had some really good exchanges with people that disagree with me. I've never had a negative exchange. I can go out there and say the Wheel of Time is shit because this, and that, and people go, "Oh yeah, that," or people go, "I disagree with you." But I've never had a negative exchange where things just turn, juvenile, nasty, name calling or anything like that.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the pleasure. I sort of want people to tell me I'm wrong. No matter what video that I make, like, you're trying to promote discourse, you're trying to promote discussion. It's kind of a bit boring if everybody says, "Yes, you're right, Chris. How wonderful you are. You're you know what I mean."
Or is it because your average reading public is more intelligent than your average person, so it doesn't
It
devolve
could
into
very
that?
well be true that way. Yeah, there's no doubt. Like, people aren't wasting an hour of their time reading a 600-page book. They're
There you go. There you go.
capital S. I like it.
Yeah. And it's not a truckload; it's truckloads.
Loads.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a heavy time investment in reading fantasy books, and at a certain point, there's very few books I've ever read that I went the whole way along going, "This is incredible." There's always been things that nitpick at you and go, "Ooh,
Yeah. I mean,
don't like this."
Recently, I blame I made a video about this. So, God bless the algorithm. I get recommended this video by, I think it's Matt's Fantasy Reviews or whatever, and he's talking about the most overrated fantasy books of all time or whatever. So I'm watching it and going, "Yeah, okay, I can see that. Ooh, I don't know that series, whatever." And then he mentioned The Lord of the Rings, and I was like, "Nah." I was like, "Nah. No. Lord of the Rings will never be overrated." So I made a video. I said, "These are the reasons why, and this is why you're wrong, Matt." And so I mentioned him on the description of my video.
Yeah.
And he replied, and I was like, "Oh, thank you for that. This is great. Would you like to collaborate in my next video?" I was like, "Yeah, sure, So, like, how often can you tell someone that they are exceptionally wrong and they are grateful for it, and they ask you to collaborate with them?
But that's exactly the point. You want the other opinion. You want somebody to tell you, and not just tell you in one line why you disagree with them. You made a video about it. You know what I mean? You thought about what you were going to say, and you kind of go, "Okay, this makes me think." My opinions aren't set in stone either.
No, and I think, luckily, we are all aware this is not the subject that we both teach. Ultimately, taste is subjective, isn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
And I think we all understand that, and I can be aware of the shortcomings of, I don't know, Dragonlance Forgotten Realms, but I can still say I still love it because of,
for sure,
whatever.
I think I had said about the book through Expanse book, like, it's really what I think a poorly written book. It's a disaster of a bit from a structure, narrative stuff, but there's bits that I absolutely love about it as well. There are good parts of BookTube. A lot of different types of BookTube. It kind of blows my mind, kind of how expansive it all is, and how stretched out everybody is, and yet can kind of come together in certain times. Like, the weekends for live streams are bananas. Look how many's on the night. Oh, you're muted.
Oh, still muted. Sorry. I'm still recovering from this cold.
Yeah.
I don't know. Recently, who was it? Yeah, it was Matt. So he did this video where he invited 20, 25 other booktubers to talk about their favorite book, right?
Yeah.
So he invited me at the Mudbit, and then I went to check the video. I mean, weird. Why am I invited there amongst, Philip Chase and these other people that are, and there's me, But anyway, so then I'm reading through the comments, and there's people having a go at him for not having enough. What's the word these days? The diversity.
Right. Okay.
And it's like, you're just wanting to put people down for no good reason. Like I'm not entirely sure. He had in mind, oh, I must have a black person, a Chinese person. You talk to who you talk to, and I don't know what's the need of that.
Diversity. There's a couple of videos being made recently about it. Before did one about representation within fantasy and all the rest of it. And I do agree. Like, the representation is really important. I do. But at a certain stage, you can make content without giving a thought for diversity, but not be having a go at it, or putting it down or saying it's not important. You're just asking the 25 people you know. If you had known 30 people, you'd ask 30 people. You know what I mean? You're going to ask the creators that you go with, and you're not thinking about, right, God, have I got a good representation? Because that's just the people that you interact with, and it doesn't mean that you're trying to make a point.
And don't get me wrong here, just so that we're all clear. I think some people that follow me will know this. My wife is black. My kids are mixed race.
Yeah.
So, I'm not going to use but we don't all have to have a black friend and a Chinese friend to hit our diversity quotas and be decent human beings, right? My kids are the only black kids in the whole school. My wife is the only black person in the town we live in. It's depending on where you come from, depending on where you are, that's who you're going to talk to. It seems like these days we all have to be hitting the numbers. And
like I have a child who's trans. I don't think they ever mentioned it. It's not important. It's kind of one of those things where you kind of go, I don't need to make a deal out of it because it is more inclusive. It just is the way that life is,
Yeah.
It's just my circumstances. I'm not going to put it in the top of every song my videos. I can say this because of my own particular circumstances or my own particular relations or anything to do with that. It's just it's what it is.
Because I've talked about it in the past when I've reviewed books where some characters are homosexual or particularly in the realm of the otherlings, there's a lot of themes about sexual identity or gender identity, whatever it is, right? And the only book where I've seen it done well is in Realm of the Otherlings. Every other book I've seen where a character is homosexual or whatever it is, it's like, I don't care. And I don't care because it's not important to the story.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether, unless being homosexual or whatever unless that has got an impact or a relevance for the character and the story.
Yeah.
Most of the time, just like in real life, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Again, I say this to my son. Like, your sexuality is sort of like the least interesting part about any of us as a person. Like, so why would be a big deal in any like singular moment or otherwise doesn't really make an awful lot of sense.
And those things are only interesting when something happens. Which I don't know. I mean, I was in a situation in my previous work when I was in London where this gentleman, very late in his life, family man, kids, whatever, he decided to become a woman, identify as a woman, whatever. But we were in this meeting with his clients, which had only seen him once before, and now he was there as a hair. So she was talking about this prior meeting, and these poor clients were totally confused because they were in a meeting with some dude, and now there's this woman, and it's like, oh man, like you really gotta tell them that. But so unless you're in situations like that, and if you're writing a story with whatever kind of character, unless it's relevant and it has got implications, to me, it's just totally uninteresting.
Yeah, I agree. There has to be a reason for it rather than just kind of ticking a box. Because in me, that is the wrong way to do diversity, especially in a non-visual medium. For instance, this
Yeah.
I saw like the Rings of Power. As you're saying, you left it
Oh,
up in episode 4. I've just finished episode 4, and I'm very meh about it. But
so I find that a Wheel of Time, the TV show, had the same issue where you've got these remote communities isolated somewhere, and you've got these diverse, sort of racially diverse people living together. It's like, how does that happen? Whereas if you want to do it right, in my opinion, The Walking Dead is a show and the comic book series where you got the whole racial diversity going on there, but it doesn't screech. It's very natural because you've got these post-apocalyptic kind of society thing where people from different walks of life
coming
band
together,
together because of a common necessity and a common goal, and therefore, again, the race doesn't matter.
see,
You've got all these racially diverse characters, but it's not tokenistic and actually is relevant to the story.
yeah, see, the Rings of Power. If it wasn't for the online discourse about it, I don't even think I'd have noticed that it was a thing. Other than everybody was talking about it, talking about Lenny Henry and talking about what's he doing. Again,
I
it's totally oblivious to it. I think that shows it's got bigger problems than its diversity issues.
I made a video many months. I think it was last year, many months ago, before we knew anything about the show,
Mm-hmm.
and I said I'm totally uninterested because it's not an adaptation. They don't have the rights to
That's right.
anything. They're not adapting anything. It's just glorified fan fiction, and I'm not interested. I tried to watch it, and after 4 episodes, I quit. I didn't find it.
It's sort of fine to me. I'm going to keep on watching it because what else am I
But
going to watch?
but but the whole thing, I don't. But forget about the racial. It's just the characters are not very well written. It's just not a very good show, unfortunately.
For me, it's the Tolkien-esque part of it. I just don't know if Lord of the Rings had come out today, it would have hit in the
I
same way
think
that Tolkien work is. I don't know.
I
It's
no, I think it would have. I think if Lord of the Rings, the movies have been made today instead of 20 years ago, there's a massive fan base there
yeah,
for
there is
Lord
for
of the
sure.
Rings. Um, and but back to the point I was making before, Lord of the Rings can never be overrated. All of modern fantasy
It's
owes
based on yeah, for sure.
Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, one
Yeah,
way or another, either as a copycat or either as a reactionary against it. But if it wasn't for it, we
that's for
wouldn't
sure.
have any of what we got today. So I think there was and it's just an epic tale. It's a good versus evil, very classic tale in a fantasy, and those things always have appeal, whether it's a
Yeah,
western or a you know World War II type thing. It's just a very classic tale.
that's good. Yeah, it's the acting and dialogue. I should say, shut it. I couldn't tell whether it was really awful or just. There's some characters playing it for laughs. There's some characters playing it super seriously. There's like a discordant kind of setup of different people wanting different things out of even the performances. It just doesn't
I
really work.
I'll tell you the two things that caught my eye because I'm not a film critic. I don't know much about it, but there were a lot of lines of dialogue and kind of musical themes that were, to me, clearly calling back or referencing the Peter Jackson
Yeah, the
trilogy.
films. Yeah, yeah.
So they were trying to echo that, and also the bit that sometimes jarred was the tone. So particularly the fight scenes. Some of the
Mm,
fight scenes were the sort of this Matrix style, super defying the laws of physics, jumping about type thing. And next thing you've got a very gritty, bone snapping, ultra realistic. But it's like, how is this the same show from 2 scenes ago or 1 episode ago? Is that inconsistency of tone?
Is that Discordant thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's no consistency. Like I'd say, Morford Clark, who plays Galadriel, I think is a terrific actress, but she plays it so straight, almost way too, almost like a Shakespearean performance. And yet there's others around her that are very much aware that they are in a fantasy adaptation.
Yeah.
And a world, and you're like, this person just sticks out like a sore thumb.
Oh, and
because
then,
they're like not like in the joke or something.
Yeah, and then the joke of it all. You remember someone did the video there when they had the super fans. These people, like in different countries, they had different book YouTubers that they got an advance showing of the first 2 episodes, and then they were in some sort of debate round table about it, and they all threw them to a castle in Spain, in Mallorca, and they filmed them going into the castle, and then they had the discussion with the super fans. But it turns out none of those super fans, someone did the job of going through the different channels or Instagram pages. None of them talk about Rings of Power or Lord of the Rings. It was such a fake, such a production and that people, particularly this day and age of the internet, you kind of pull shit like that because you're going to get found out straight away.
Oh, tell me about it. Like you can make a video about the Wheel of Time, and people will find it. It'll be recommended in their comments down the side, and then people that don't know you at all are coming and seeing you for the first time at that stage. So it doesn't take too hard to find people who are more prominent than that, like on TV or something like that.
Yeah, I think that show was made for the wrong reasons. Clearly, Amazon was looking for the next.
Yeah,
they wanted their own Game of Thrones. They wanted their own successful fantasy show. They tried with Wheel of Time, and they tried with Rings of Power, and they both fell flat.
Wheel of Time's so bad.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Wheel of Time TV show either got cancelled after 3 seasons or rushed, cut short.
Well, it felt like the first season was rushed, but the things that I dislike about that first series go beyond unfinished CGI and stuff. I don't know. When I think about the beats of that first book, none of them appeared in the show for me. You never get a sense that Rand was actually very powerful at all. He bust down a door in the series. I mean, that was pretty much the extent of his power that he could show in that whole first series. I was like, is that it? This guy's going to rip the world in two? Like, it's not.
but also, again, the whole diversity thing. Most of the people that will watch the Wheel of Time show would have been fans of the books, would have read the books. So then they're trying to shoehorn in the fact that any of the 2 girls could be the Dragon Reborn. Anyone that has read the books knows that that's not the case.
Yeah.
So this sort of, I mean, I think Brandon Sanderson put it in an interview. He's never outright said that the show is not good, but he did say that it is a different iteration of the Wheel. There is a different retelling of the story type thing. That was his justification for it.
Oh dear. Well, that's my time up, Jose. That was great fun. That was past my time very nicely. Even though it wasn't impromptu.
No, thank you ever so much, because I quite like, those nights when you go out without a plan in mind, and then you wake up on the beach at 8 a.m. That's kind of what this conversation turned out to be. Thank you.
That might be the greatest compliment I've ever had in my life. I like it. Well, thanks very much for having me on. And sorry to anybody that tuned in. Hope to see Jolien, because I'm sure she would have been intensely more interesting than I would have been. But you got what you got.
No. Thank you. No. Thank you. Thank you ever so much. I love these conversations. I think
it's good fun.
I think Steve's got the right of it, isn't it? Every Friday, he's got a conversation going, isn't it?
It does. It's something for people to tune into and appointment viewing.
I wish I could do the same. So no, much appreciated. And hopefully Jolien will be feeling better, and we can repeat next Friday.
That'd be lovely. I'll tune in then. Indeed.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris, and thank you,
All right.
Shadia, and
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks everybody who was in there. Yep.
Take
Speak to
care.
you
Bye
soon.
bye.
Take care. All the best. Bye.